Will Vladimir Putin ever be ready for peace? This is the World Brief with me, Aaron Dahmen, and your week in 10 minutes starts now.
Ukraine is interested in achieving results. As of now, we cannot say the outcome is sufficient.
There's no other country in Europe that's been able to do it. The United States has been successful at being able to get both sides to talk.
Despite the fact that there are some kind of peace talks, even though someone is deciding something there, the war continues and our people are dying. I'm waiting for my son more than anything, even though he has been missing in action for 3 years. I haven't been able to find him anywhere, but I'm still waiting. I believe he's alive. That keeps me going.
We understand what the enemy is attempting to do. They want to make the lives of Ukrainians insufferable so that we give up.
And here to brief us tonight is our correspondent Alex Kadier, who is in Kyiv ahead of the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Alex, welcome to the programme. So talks and more talks. No breakthrough in Geneva, no breakthrough elsewhere. Where to next?
Well, no breakthrough there, because if you speak to people here, they don't expect a breakthrough. They see the perspective of these talks as something that will be used by the Russian side to waste as much time as is humanly possible. We've heard from President Zelensky. He said there has been some progress on some of the political issues when it comes to perhaps considering some kind of ceasefire. There's been progress on prisoner exchanges, but Ukraine and Russia have exchanged prisoners before. They've done that without this format, without Steve Witkoff, without the United States. They've done that directly. So what next? Well, the war will continue like it has for nearly 4 years, and we get a feeling in Ukraine of exhaustion with still some determination. But we heard from President Zelensky saying very clearly Ukraine cannot continue to be a buffer for Europe indefinitely against Russia's threat. So this will not be a moment, this will be a moment of reflection, of course, thinking of how much this country has had to endure for 4 years, but also looking to its European partners and frankly looking at them and saying, when are you going to step up? This has to be taken very seriously. Ukraine will fight on, but cannot do so forever, Aaron.
I want to talk about that feeling on the ground in a few days. As I mentioned, it will be 4 years of this all-out war. You are on the ground. You are in Kyiv. Take me to where you are.
Yeah, well, it's just the centre of Kyiv. This is Kreshchatyk, the big avenue behind me. We're just a stone's throw away from Maidan, of course, where all of this began, where the Revolution of Dignity back in 2013 began, where the then Russia-friendly President Yanukovych security forces cracked down on those protesters. This is the anniversary of the deadliest day of that revolution, 48 killed by the security forces at that time, and of course a day of reflection. But that fight carries on. That fight has been carrying on the entire time. It started, of course, with the annexation of Crimea, with the so-called independent republics in the Donbass region, and then, of course, the full-scale invasion in February 2022. As I said, there is a feeling here of resilience, of determination. They will continue, of course, to fight. They have no choice, because the other option is to lose their homeland, to lose their country, to lose everything they have been fighting for 4 years. That is that feeling for most Ukrainians, but also, as I said, this feeling of it cannot carry on forever. Turning west, of course, the United States' support has effectively diminished to zero. Therefore, they feel, without a doubt, Europe has to step up.
Alex Kadier, thank you very much from Kyiv, and we will return to Ukraine in just a moment. But here's what's also making news on Friday, the 20th of February. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has been released from custody as police investigate the former prince over his ties to the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk is urging citizens to evacuate Iran immediately, warning that the risk of open conflict is real as the United States weighs up strikes on the Middle Eastern country. And Donald Trump has hosted the first meeting of his ascribed Board of Peace, with $17 billion pledged in Gaza relief, even as many of America's Western allies refuse to sign up. Right, it's time to head around the region, and tonight we're off to the Nordics for another TVP World exclusive with Adam Yasa speaking to the President of Finland, Alexander Stubb. Much has been made of how the Global South could help strike peace in Ukraine, about how the Far East, including China, could finally sway Vladimir Putin. In fact, back in 2024, President Stubb told me this.
China is in such a driver's seat right now, it needs to basically be in touch with the Russians and say, time to start the negotiations. But I stress, it has to be a just peace from the perspective of Ukraine.
Talk me through that relationship with China. In May, you met with Xi Jinping, a member of the political bureau of the Communist Party of China. China, like you say, is a superpower that could have much influence on the war in Ukraine. Did you discuss the war with him, and what did you say?
We did, and I keep on saying it, both privately and publicly. One phone call. I know there's a little bit of exaggeration there, but nevertheless, from Xi Jinping to Vladimir Putin saying that it is time to negotiate, I think that would do it.
Fast forward to today and our follow-up interview with President Stubb. And as it turns out, Xi Jinping was listening to what he had to say 2 years ago.
I was on a state visit to China, to Beijing, and I spent the better part of 3 hours with President Xi Jinping. And this was in November 2024, so it's almost a year and a half ago. And that's when I had said that. And the first thing President Xi Jinping said, Mr. President, you have said that I could end this war with one phone call. I said, it's a bit more complicated than that. And then we laughed. We need to negotiate a peace agreement and stop this war. I think President Trump is correct on that. But now I think most of the cards are actually with Ukraine.
Of course, the other global power in this equation is the United States of America. I sat down with Poland's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference after he had met with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And I put it to him, does Washington see Ukraine as a priority?
I'm not sure. I think the US is pivoting in the security sphere to the Far East. I think the US preference is for the war to end, whereas our preference is for it to end the right way.
That's the big news. Here's what's trending, and a Russian woman has stepped forward to back Ukraine on one of sport's biggest stages. Having lived in Italy for years, it's been revealed Anastasia Kucherova carried the Ukrainian team placard as a volunteer at the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics. Dressed in a hooded silver puffer coat, this is why she did it.
I chose to present Ukraine, to be the placard bearer of Ukraine, because I've been supporting Ukraine since the beginning of the conflict with Russia. Even though I'm a Russian citizen, I don't support the actions of my country.
Now, as we look ahead to the 4th anniversary next week of Russia's all-out war in Ukraine, I ask myself, as many do, how and when does this end? We know the key sticking point. Territory. But on top of that, there's the question of security guarantees and if Vladimir Putin would ever actually strike a deal. We've seen delegations zip around the world. Istanbul, the Middle East, Geneva, no breakthrough. We've heard things are 90% of the way there, still no breakthrough. For what it's worth, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says news of a breakthrough likely won't come until there is one. But then, as you heard earlier in the program, Minister Sikorski isn't even sure if Rubio, who is regarded as the diplomatic face of the Donald Trump administration, sees peace in Ukraine as a priority. There is some light on the horizon for Ukraine, however small, however slight, and that is the end of winter. A bitter, cold winter that Russia has used to target energy infrastructure, to attack from the sky, and to freeze out the Ukrainian people. The question for Volodymyr Zelensky now, the question for Ukraine, is how to keep the West, especially the United States, on side. How does the President come from the dark and the cold and the suffering at home and enter conference rooms and mix and mingle with the suits and convince leaders to ramp up pressure on the Kremlin. And just like that, we're back at square one. How and when does this end? For now, a 4-year mark. A brutal 4-year fight that has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. For now, a testament to human resilience in Ukraine and a European security order that is changing before our very eyes. And that's the World Brief. I'm Aaron Dahmen. You can follow us on YouTube or wherever you get your news. I'll see you next week.